It is the second week of May. The Chelsea Flower Show is less than 2 weeks away. Gardeners across England are planting out their summer bedding. Pub gardens are packed. And the Met Office has just issued a significant weather warning covering 13 counties across England and Scotland. For snow. Not frost, not sleet, snow. 30 consecutive hours of it, beginning Tuesday afternoon and persisting through Wednesday evening, with Arctic air dragging temperatures to near freezing across vast areas of the country, overnight frosts threatening gardens and agriculture that have already opened for the season, and the very real prospect of thundersnow, one of the rarest and most dramatic weather phenomena the British Isles ever experiences, breaking out over northern regions. If you thought that UK had seen its last wintry weather for 2026 when the clocks went forward, you were wrong. The Arctic has one more move to make this spring, and it is making it right now. This is not a tabloid exaggeration. The warning maps published by WX Charts and corroborated by the UK Met Office and multiple professional meteorological services show snow spreading from northwest Scotland at around 6 in the evening on Tuesday, May 12th, intensifying across central and northern Scotland through the night, and pushing southward into Yorkshire, the northern Midlands, and parts of northern England by Wednesday morning. The storm system delivering this event is forecast to maintain continuous snowfall for approximately 30 hours, a duration that, at this time of year, with road networks stripped of their winter maintenance readiness and agricultural communities already deep into spring growing cycles, has the potential to cause disproportionately severe disruption compared to an identical event in January or February. The scale of the geographic footprint and the depth of the seasonal timing is what makes this a genuinely significant warning, and the 13 counties and regions now under weather alerts deserve a complete and honest account of what is coming, when it arrives, how long it stays, and what it means for people living in every part of the affected zone. Start with the atmospheric mechanics driving this event, because understanding why this is happening in May requires understanding the larger weather pattern that has governed the UK since the beginning of the month. The country has been locked in a persistent northwesterly flow. Air streaming down from high-latitude Arctic and subarctic regions, channeled southward by the position of the jet stream sitting well to the north of the British Isles. This flow has already delivered the dramatic north-south temperature split that made headlines across the UK this weekend, with southern England reaching 22 degrees Celsius, while Scottish mountain summits saw snow flurries, and overnight temperatures fell to -1 to -3 degrees Celsius on higher ground. That split was the warning sign. The cold air was already in place. The atmospheric configuration was already primed. What arrives Tuesday is the intensification of that pattern, a deepening low-pressure system pulling an even colder, more directly Arctic air mass southward and wrapping a band of precipitation around it that will fall as snow across every region where temperatures are cold enough to prevent the conversion to rain. Meteorologist Nick Finnis, one of the most closely followed professional forecasters in the UK independent weather community, specifically highlighted the severity of the incoming northerly flow in his assessment of the event. His analysis described how the Arctic air engulfs the region in a sequence, with temperatures plummeting to near freezing levels across substantial areas of Scotland as the first bands of the storm arrive. The trajectory of the storm system was mapped with considerable precision in his forecast output. The first heavy bands reaching northwest Scotland by approximately 6 in the evening on Tuesday, the core of the storm sustaining snowfall for roughly 30 consecutive hours, and the event persisting until approximately 9 in the evening on Wednesday. That is not a brief shower or a light dusting on high ground. That is a prolonged, organized precipitation event producing genuine snow accumulations across a geographic footprint that extends from the Scottish Highlands to parts of Yorkshire and the northern Midlands. The 13 counties and regions under active weather warnings, or significant forecast alerts as of Monday, May 11th, 2026, span the full range of the storm's expected impact zone. In Scotland, the areas facing the most intense and prolonged snowfall include Ayr and the Ayrshire coast, central Scotland, including Stirling and Falkirk, and the northern regions, stretching through Inverness and Aberdeen to the Moray Firth coast. Northwest Scotland, the Highlands, the Western Isles, and the area around Loch Linnhe and the Great Glen will see the first heavy snow arrive by early Tuesday evening, with accumulations building through the night as the core of the cold air mass settles in. The Scottish Highlands have been the most consistently cold region of the country throughout this entire northerly spell, with the Mountain Weather Information Service reporting overnight temperatures between -1 and -3 Celsius on summits and wintry showers already affecting high ground through the weekend. The Tuesday through Wednesday storm represents a major escalation of those already wintry conditions to lower elevations across a much wider area of Scotland than the mountain zones that have been carrying snow through the weekend. In northern England, Yorkshire is the region facing the most significant snowfall risk south of the Scottish border. The forecast specifically identifies Harrogate and Darlington as locations where snow is expected by midday on Wednesday, as the storm's precipitation band pushes southward from Scotland overnight. The high ground of the North York Moors, the Yorkshire Dales, and the Pennines will channel and enhance snowfall accumulations significantly above what the surrounding lowlands receive. For motorists using the A66 Trans-Pennine route, the M62 corridor across the Pennine Hills, and the A1M through North Yorkshire, Wednesday morning travel conditions could be seriously hazardous. These routes have a documented history of severe disruption during late-season snow events because the elevation of the crossing points is high enough to produce significant accumulations, even when precipitation falls as rain at lower levels in the towns on either side. Further west in Lancashire, the picture is more nuanced. Blackpool, Preston, and Blackburn are forecast to see rainfall rather than snow, as the slightly lower elevation and marginally warmer surface temperatures in the northwest of England prevent snow from establishing at those specific locations. But the boundary between rain and snow in a storm of this type is extremely sensitive to small temperature variations, and the Met Office has previously cautioned in similar situations that even locations currently forecast for rain should be prepared for the possibility of brief snow mixing in if temperatures drop slightly below model expectations during the peak of the event. Parts of the Midlands are included in the warning footprint, though with lower confidence and lower accumulation expectations than the northern regions. The storm's southernmost extent is forecast to clip the higher ground of the Peak District and the moorland areas of Derbyshire and Staffordshire, where even modest snow accumulations on already cold ground can create ice hazards on rural roads that persist well into the following day after the precipitation has ended. Southern Scotland, specifically the border regions, including Dumfries and Galloway and the Scottish borders, faces a transition zone where the heaviest accumulations from the storm's core over central and northern Scotland taper off, but where snow on higher ground and overnight frost across lower areas is still a significant forecast feature. The thunder snow risk is one of the most striking elements of this particular event, and deserves specific explanation because it is genuinely unusual even by British standards, and because its implications for conditions on the ground are more severe than ordinary snowfall of equivalent accumulation. Thundersnow is exactly what its name suggests: a thunderstorm in which the precipitation falls as snow rather than rain. It requires a specific set of atmospheric conditions that are relatively rare in Britain. The lowest layers of the atmosphere must be cold enough to support snow formation, but simultaneously, there must be sufficient instability, rising air columns energetic enough to generate the charge separation that produces lightning and thunder within the cold air mass. In a standard cold air outbreak, these two requirements tend to work against each other. The cold air is stable and does not easily produce the convective instability that powers thunderstorms. But when the cold air mass is particularly deep and the sea surface temperatures over the North Sea and the waters northwest of Scotland are warm relative to the air above them, the contrast between the frigid air and the relatively warmer ocean surface generates violent convective cells within the cold air mass itself. And those cells can produce thunder, lightning, and extremely intense localized snowfall in a compact burst that is far heavier than the surrounding ambient snowfall. Your Weather UK documented a thundersnow event in late winter 2026 that brought up to 25 centimeters of snow to parts of northern England and Scotland in a compressed time frame, turning roads treacherous within minutes and catching transport networks entirely off guard. The same atmospheric setup that produced that event, a deep Arctic air mass over waters warm enough to generate convective instability, is present in the May 12-13 storm system, and the thundersnow risk flagged in the forecast is not a remote or the travel disruption implications of a 30-hour May snowstorm affecting 13 regions deserve extended discussion because they are meaningfully different from what the same storm would produce in January. And understanding why requires understanding how the UK's transport resilience infrastructure actually operates across the seasons. The UK maintains a tiered system, OF winter road maintenance, that is structured around historical probability of hazardous conditions. The highest priority routes, motorways, A roads, key arterial links, remain on a readiness footing throughout the winter season and into the early weeks of spring. But as the calendar advances into May, many local authorities progressively stand down elements of their winter maintenance operations. Gridding lorries are returned to depots. Salt and grit stockpiles that have been drawn down through the winter are not yet replenished for the following season. Contracted drivers who operate gridding routes during winter are released from standby arrangements. The logic of this operational cycle is sound in normal years. The statistical probability of hazardous snow in mid-May is low enough that maintaining full winter readiness infrastructure indefinitely is economically indefensible. But when an unusual late season event like the May 12-13 Arctic blast does arrive, the consequence of reduced maintenance readiness is that roads which would have been pre-treated and actively gridded in January receive less comprehensive treatment in May, and the ice that forms overnight from Wednesday into Thursday morning may persist longer on untreated surfaces than it would have in the heart of winter. The travel specialist community has been direct about this risk. Analysis published by travel industry sources on May 11, 2026, specifically noted that many operators scale back winter resilience measures as spring progresses, meaning that gridding resources, snow clearing equipment, and contingency timetables may not be as readily available as they would be in January or February. That assessment aligns directly with the experience of the 2025-26 winter season, during which a sequence of named storms brought heavy snow to parts of Scotland, Wales, and northern England in January, triggering multiple Met Office snow and ice warnings, blocked roads, speed restrictions on motorways, and timetable changes on railways. Those events occurred during a period when full winter resilience was in place. What arrives Tuesday does so when that full resilience has already begun to stand down. For rail operators, the specific hazards of late-season snow on a network that has begun transitioning to spring maintenance schedules include the risk of points failures. The switching mechanisms that route trains between tracks can freeze and become inoperable when temperatures drop below freezing, and the heating systems built into railway points infrastructure require active winter maintenance protocols that may not be at full operational readiness in mid-May. Network Rail has historically issued speed restrictions across affected regions during heavy snow events, reducing train speeds to limit the risk of derailments on snow-covered or iced tracks. Those restrictions translate directly into extended journey times and cascading delays across the national network. Passengers planning to travel by rail through Yorkshire, Scotland, and northern England on Wednesday should monitor live service information and allow significantly extended journey times, regardless of what their scheduled departure suggests. Aviation faces a different but equally disruptive set of challenges. The major Scottish airports, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, and Inverness, all have comprehensive de-icing infrastructure and trained crews. But the rate of de-icing operations during a heavy snowfall event is a physical constraint on the number of aircraft departures that can be processed per hour. When accumulation rates exceed the capacity of de-icing crews to clear aircraft and keep runways operational, ground stops and departure delays cascade through the timetable for hours after conditions begin to improve. Shetland's ferry connections to the mainland, which have already been flagged as vulnerable to weather-related disruptions during this cold spell, face additional pressure from the combination of rough seas generated by the storm's low-pressure system and the logistical complications of winter. Weather operations at island terminals. The Travel and Tour World Analysis published this weekend documented that airports serving Scotland and northern England had already seen later departures during this cold spell as crews worked to de-ice runways and aircraft, and that ferry timetables in remote regions like Shetland can change rapidly if sea conditions worsen with a cold front, exactly the type of cold front that is arriving Tuesday. The agricultural dimension of a May snow event is one that often receives insufficient attention in weather reporting and deserves specific consideration here. British farming follows a seasonal calendar in which mid-May represents one of the most critical and sensitive transition points of the entire growing year. Spring-sown crops, barley, wheat, oats, potatoes, sugar beet, that were planted in March and April are now in the vulnerable early growth stages, where a late frost or snow event can cause cellular damage to plant tissue that permanently reduces yield. Soft fruit growers in Scotland, Yorkshire, and the northern Midlands, who have already seen blossom opening on strawberries, raspberries, and other early season crops, face the risk of frost damage to open flowers that cannot set fruit once their cellular structure is destroyed by freezing temperatures. The National Farmers Union has historically flagged late frost and snow events in May as among the most economically damaging weather events for UK agriculture, precisely because they arrive after growers have already committed to planting, covering, and managing crops on the assumption that the primary frost risk period has passed. An overnight frost in mid-May on unprotected blossom can eliminate an entire soft fruit harvest for a farm that has spent the previous 6 months preparing for the season. Livestock farming faces a different but equally serious challenge. Many sheep farmers in Scotland, Yorkshire, and the northern Midlands have lambs on the ground that were born in March and April and are now in the most rapid growth phase of their first weeks of life. Newborn and very young lambs are vulnerable to hypothermia during severe cold snaps, particularly when the cold arrives alongside wet and windy conditions that accelerate heat loss from small bodies with limited fat reserves. Farmers across the affected regions will be monitoring weather warnings and making decisions about whether to bring vulnerable animals indoors or provide additional shelter before Tuesday's storm arrives. The 30-hour duration of the forecast snowfall means that any lambs caught in the open during the worst of the event face an extended exposure period, rather than a brief weather insult that passes quickly. The health implications of an Arctic blast in mid-May are compounded by the seasonal context in a way that makes this event more dangerous for vulnerable populations than the raw temperature numbers might suggest. The UK Health Security Agency has a well-established framework for issuing cold weather health alerts. Amber alerts are triggered when there is a high probability that cold temperatures will have a significant impact on the health of the population, particularly older people, young children, and those with underlying cardiovascular or respiratory conditions. Those alert thresholds are calibrated against winter baseline conditions. In May, the population is less behaviorally prepared for cold. Homes have been ventilated rather than heated. Older people, who would automatically put on extra layers and check heating systems in January, may not take the same precautions when the calendar says spring. The UKHSA's cold weather health communications specifically identify this seasonal complacency as a factor that amplifies the health impact of late-season cold events. The combination of genuinely Arctic temperatures and a population that has psychologically transitioned to spring makes the health risk calculus for this May event different and potentially more dangerous. The Shetland Islands, which are already the leading edge of the cold air's progression southward through this entire spell, deserve specific mention because they have experienced conditions over the past week that document exactly how unusual this May cold snap is in historical context. The Travel and Tour World reporting on May 7th documented snowfall in Shetland and overnight temperatures dropping to minus 6.1 degrees Celsius, described by the Met Office as the sharpest drop this late in the year since 2021. Making it the coldest May night in 5 years. Across the UK on that record-breaking night, frost-coated fields and windows in many regions, with Scotland's Highlands experiencing the lowest readings. The Met Office confirmed that this kind of severe chill at this time of year is rare and well below seasonal averages. That assessment was made before the Tuesday-Wednesday storm system was fully developed in the forecast models. What arrives this week represents a further and more substantial intensification of the same pattern that has already produced record-low May temperatures in Scotland. The Met Office's approach to communicating this event reflects the genuine severity of the forecaster community's assessment, without crossing into the kind of alarmist overstatement that the Met Office has specifically and publicly pushed back against in recent weeks. In a blog post published in April 2026, specifically addressing the gap between dramatic weather headlines circulating online and the actual forecast, Met Office scientists carefully distinguished between events that warrant significant public concern and events that are being overstated for engagement purposes. The criteria they applied, genuinely unusual timing, geographic breadth of impact, duration of event, and specific hazard to transport, agriculture, and health, are all met by the May 12th to 13 Arctic blast. This is not a normal late-season cold snap. A 30-hour snowfall event covering 13 counties in mid-May, driven by a directly Arctic air mass, with thundersnow risk and overnight frost implications for already planted crops and young livestock, sits outside the range of what seasonal meteorological statistics would identify as anything other than a significant and genuinely unusual event. The broader context in which this May Arctic blast is occurring adds a layer of meaning that stretches beyond the immediate forecast period. The United Kingdom in the spring of 2026 has experienced one of the most meteorologically volatile first halves of the year in recent memory. January 2026 began with a major Arctic outbreak that brought temperatures to minus 10.9 degrees Celsius. At Shap in Cumbria, snow accumulations of 52 centimeters at Tomintoul in Banffshire, and amber cold health alerts across the whole of England. The Met Office documented that January cold spell as a network of warnings covering Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and central and southern England simultaneously, one of the most geographically extensive cold weather events since records began. February and March brought the phone effect warmth that pushed temperatures to 21 degrees Celsius in parts of England before a rapid return to wintry conditions. April was described by the Met Office as the sunniest on record for many UK regions, and now May is delivering a 30-hour Arctic snowstorm across 13 counties just days after southern England reached 22 degrees Celsius. The pattern of 2026's UK weather is not just remarkable as a year-to-date summary. It is a demonstration of the kind of extreme seasonal variability that atmospheric scientists have been monitoring with increasing concern as climate change alters the dynamics of the polar jet stream. The rapidity with which the UK can transition from record warmth to Arctic snow, sometimes within the same week, as has happened repeatedly across 2026, reflects the increased amplitude of the jet stream's meanders. A more meandering jet stream produces more persistent blocking, more extreme regional temperature anomalies in both directions, and a weather calendar that swings between extremes with less of the gradual seasonal progression that dominated the UK climate throughout much of the 20th century. The May Arctic blast is not an isolated freak event. It is the latest manifestation of a pattern that has characterized every season of 2026 so far. What should people across the 13 affected regions actually do with this information before Tuesday's storm arrives? The answer is specific and practical. Anyone planning road travel through Yorkshire, Scotland, or the Northern Midlands on Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday night, or Wednesday morning should consult Live Met Office and travel update services, and build in the assumption that their journey will take significantly longer than normal, or consider whether it can be postponed until conditions improve on Wednesday evening. Farmers with vulnerable livestock should make shelter decisions before Tuesday afternoon when conditions deteriorate. Growers with unprotected blossom or early season crops should assess frost protection options for Tuesday night into Wednesday. Anyone in Scotland's affected regions who is elderly, lives alone, or has underlying health conditions should take exactly the same precautions they would take during a January cold snap. Maintain heating, avoid unnecessary outdoor exposure during peak. Cold and snowfall, check on neighbors and family members, and have emergency contact numbers readily accessible. The Met Office's extended outlook for the remainder of May offers some reassurance that the Arctic blast is not the permanent character of the month. After the storm clears Wednesday evening, conditions are expected to gradually improve through the remainder of the week. The long-range forecast indicates that by late May, the jet stream is likely to shift to a more southerly position, allowing higher pressure to build from the southwest and bringing longer periods of dry, fine weather to most of the country. Temperatures are expected to recover towards seasonal averages and potentially above them as the month ends. The cold spell currently gripping the north is a late winter parting shot, not a new climatic reality for the spring. But before that improvement arrives, 13 regions of England and Scotland face up to 30 hours of Arctic snowfall, thundersnow risk, overnight frosts, and travel disruption on a scale that May in Britain rarely and genuinely does not deserve. The Arctic blast is incoming. The warnings are issued. What happens next depends entirely on how seriously the affected regions take the time they still have to prepare.